Hello everyone, welcome to MeghaDiscourse where literature meets with excellence. And in today's video, we are going to cover our Augustan Age, the second phase of Neoclassic Age. And this age is not just an age of emotions, not just an age of fantasy, but the age of wit, satire, and reason. Earlier I told you that Neoclassic Age is known for the age of reason, science, logic, and this can be seen in Augustan Age, where the writers like Alexander Pope and Jonathan Swift had written their works with the help of wit, satire, more heroic. We can say that Augustan Age was the age of reason, age of manners, it is the age of refinement, and the glorious Augustan Age of English literature roughly spans 1700 to 1745. Now, what does actually the term mean? The term Augustan itself reminds us of the rule of Emperor Augustan in Rome. It is an era of peace, stability, and literary perfections under masters like Horace, Juvenal, Ovid. Similarly, early 18th century in England experienced a political calm and cultural blossoming, a perfect soil for reason, logic, wit, satire. So remember these keywords so far as the Augustan Age is concerned. So this was the age of Pope and Swift, and the early phase is known as the age of Dryden. And in this age, we will read about the coffee houses where debates and political news were discussed. This age has witty periodicals and polished heroic couplets. It is a golden mirror held to human follies. So let's uncover the facts about the Augustan Age. The Augustan Age is also known as the second phase of Neoclassic Age, and it follows the Restoration Age in 1660 to 1700 and the Age of Johnson 1745 to 1798, and our Neoclassic Age ends. It is called Augustan because English writers sought to imitate the order, decorum, and balance found in classical Roman literature during Emperor Augustus. Hence, the name itself symbolizes rationality, harmony, and artistic discipline. So, the key features like reasons over emotion, order and decorum over imagination, imitation of classical models, urban and social themes, and satire as a moral weapon. These are some key features of this age. So remind it. Now let us understand the historical and social background, as it is very important to understand the scenario of the age. After decades of civil war and religious conflict, England finally found political stability with the glorious revolution happened in 1688 and the rule of William II and Mary II, later followed by Queen Anne in 1702 to 1714. So we should know about the coffee house culture as it was dominant in this age. So coffee houses like Will's and Buttons and White's, these were the name of coffee houses. They became the universities of common sense people which gathered there to read newspaper, to discuss some political matter and critique new books, and they exchange wit there. So writers like Addison, Steele, Alexander Pope, and Swift, they were regulars, and literature became a social conversation rather than a private confession. So the birth of periodical essays in the Tatler and the Spectator reflected the culture of coffee house. So societies valued manner, morality, logic, and modernization. So this was not a passionate or romantic age, it was urban, intellect, and polished age. So this is all about the historical background. Now what about political background? We should know about the politics of the age so that we can get the idea that what type of king actually ruled in that age. Politically and literary, they were interwoven two parties, Whigs and Tories. They dominated public life, like we have Roundheads and parliamentarian. So Whigs actually favored parliament and progressive, and they have Protestant succession, whereas Tories, they supported monarchy and tradition. They were like orthodox. So writers took both sides. They took like Swift, they supported Tories, and Addison and Steele, they leaned towards Whigs. And we have Pope, who was being Catholic. He stayed somewhat detached, but he used satire to expose both. So we have all type of people in that age. So political writing and journalism thrived. Pamphlets, essays, satire, it shaped public opinion. Example, Swift's The Examiner was Tory, The Spectator was Whig, and yet both aim to refine morals. Now let us move to literary background. The Augustan Age was the age of reason, satire, manner, urbanity. So the writers turned away from the extravagance of Renaissance and the sensuality of Restoration. They sought order, harmony, and moral purpose inspired by Horace, Virgil, and another classic writer. So the heroic couplet became the medium of polished expression, perfected by Alexander Pope. So critics call it the age of prose and reason because prose became natural, clear, and conversational, seen in Addison's essay and Swift irony. So this was the age that prepared the rise of English novel. So let us discuss all literary genres dominated in this age. So first one is poetry. So poetry was didactic and satirical rather than emotional. It aimed to instruct through amusement, to laugh men out of their follies. So Alexander Pope was the uncrowned king of Augustan poetry. So his major works are Essay on Criticism, written in 1711, Rules of Good Writing, and in this work he wrote To Err is Human, to Forgive Divine, important and net question. Second, he wrote The Rape of Lock, again a mock epic on a trivial incident. It includes aristocratic vanity, where is a character Belinda. The next we have The Dunciad, which actually is satire on literary dullness. Again, Essay on Man in 1733, which is a philosophical poem about human nature. Similarly, we have other poets like John Gay, who wrote The Beggar's Opera, important one, written in 1728. Actually, it is a political satire through music and ballet. The next we have Edward Young, who wrote Night Thoughts, which introduced graveyard poetry, actually the precursor of Romanticism. The next we have Thomas Parnell, who wrote The Hermit, which is actually a moral allegory. So we can say that Augustan poetry has heroic couplet, clarity and balance, imitation of classics, moral tone, and satirical language. Next genre we have prose and essay. So the essay was reborn through the periodical press. The famous one are Steele and Addison. They wrote humanized literature. The Tatler, written in 1709 by Steele, and The Spectator by Addison and Steele, both in 1711, important one. They aim to enliven morality with wit, temper wit with morality. Addison's prose is elegant and smooth, and Steele is warm and morality. So together they shape the middle class mind. So we have another Jonathan Swift, who was the master of irony, and he used it in prose for satire. He wrote A Tale of Tub, which is a religious satire. Next he wrote Gulliver Travel, actually an allegorical masterpiece. We have character like Gulliver. The next prose writers were Daniel Defoe, who wrote Robinson Crusoe, Moll Flanders. Both are important work, and please read them carefully and consciously. They are foundation of English novel. We have Lady Mary, who wrote Letters from Turkey. We have George Berkeley, who was the philosopher of idealism. So now the next genre is the rise of novel. Actually, the novel was dominant in Victorian age and we will read it in Victorian literature. The rise of novel, the Augustan Age sowed the seeds of modern English fiction. We have Daniel Defoe who wrote Robinson Crusoe in 1719, Man vs. Nature, Individualism. Then we have Samuel Richardson who wrote Pamela in 1740 and it is an actually epistolary novel. Epistolary novel is made which is written in a letter form. The next we have Henry Fielding, Joseph Andrews, Tom Jones, both are important ones, realistic, humorous and social commentary. So these are some important writers and their work. So Richardson portrayed morality and virtue, whereas Fielding portrayed sentimentality and created vivid comic character. The next form we have drama. The stage declined after Restoration Age. We have comic drama, but tragic drama was declined. But we have like Richard Steele wrote The Conscious Lover, which is actually a sentimental comedy. We have Colley Siebert, The Careless Husband. Then John Gay who wrote The Beggar's Opera, important one, political and social satire on corruption. So comedy turned gentle, but tragedy declined. So in a nutshell, we can say that the Augustan Age was the age of balance, intellect over emotions and form over feeling. So its legacy were it perfected English prose and heroic couplet. It established realism and moral purpose. It gave rise to modern journalism and the novel. So we have witty, rational and universal theme in this literature. We can say from Pope's balanced couplet to Swift's biting irony, the Augustan writers proved that even laughter could teach and reason could sing. So again, if you find my lecture insightful, then don't forget to like, share and subscribe to MeghaDiscourse. Stay connected, stay tuned for more updates. Bye bye.